the email behind it. Okay. Zivchei Shalmei Tibur B'Hashamois. Eluhain Hashamois. These are the Hashamois. Hashem Gzelos, Hashem Meilos, Hashem Shivcha Charifa. So Hashem Gzelos, if someone has money of somebody else's, and he denies it and he swears, and then Moida, he brings in Hashem Gzelos. Hashem Meilos if he's Moel Behekish. Hashem Shivcha Charufa is if he has relations with a Shivcha who was engaged to an Eved. Chatzi Shivcha is engaged to an Eved. Asham Nazir, that's a Nazir who became Tameh. So in this process of Tahira, he brings a Nazir, he brings an Asham Achatos and Shlomim. Asham Mitzayr, that's when the Mitzayr is Mitzayr. And Asham Toli is if he had a suffix, if he was over a Chayv Krisis. So all these Kavanas, Shechitas and Mitzavain, the Kibble Daman, Bechlicharis Mitzavain, and the Daman Taun Shtei Matana Shein Arba, when the Cholin, Lefnim, and Akloim, they're eaten anywhere in Dazara, Lezichrei Kahuna, to male Kahanim, the whole macho prepared anyway, for one day and one night at Chatzois, but Chazal say you shouldn't eat it all night, stop at Chatzois, Kidei Lahachik as Oda Min Ha'avera.
Is that all of them or just Osham?
Osham and Shalmei Tzibur.
Anything that's for one night and one day is midnight?
Yes. Anything is one day. That's the first mission in Brachas, right? It's also the first mission in Brachas. They said that you should also lay Krishma before Chatzois. And the Mishnah says there the same thing with Kravas, Murim, and Karbanis as well. Even though it's kosher until the daybreak, you don't do it earlier. Okay, so these are shlomim. Normally, shlomim are kaddish column, but the shalmei tzibur are kaddish kachim. Where is an example of the shlomim that the tzibur brings? Rashi says it's kivsei atzeres. It's the two karbanis that are brought on Shavuos with the shtei lechem. Okay. Zoktat helu the boy tzafim. How do you know that an Osham and a Shalmei Tzibur require tzafim? The Tani Rabba Barav Chanon Kamei de Rava. It says in the pasuk, Vasisim Sir Izim Echad Lachatos. This pasuk, let's have a look at it. Vasisim Sir Izim Echad Lachatos, Ushnei Chavosim B'Neshana L'Zevach Shlomim. These are the karbanis that are brought on Shavuos. So the Gemara says we have a hekesh from the Chatos to the Shalmei Tzibur. Ma Chatos B'Tzafoin, Av Shalmei Tzibur B'Tzafoin. I have to correct myself. Osham we've already dealt with. How you know that it needs Tzafoin. So we're only talking here about Shalmei Tzibur. Amar Le Rava. So Rava said, how could you possibly learn through a hekesh from Chatos to Shlomim? How do you know Chatos? Also from hekesh. Me'oila. So this is a davar alamed behekesh, chayzer umalamed behekesh. We're not getting out of this so fast. Ella, it must be from a different hekesh. That's a straight hekesh to oila. Ella miditani Rav Mori Berit of Kahana. It says aloy seichem. This is talking about chatzoytros that are blown. Aloy seichem balziv cheshal meichem. So you see right away that oila is compared to shlabim. And we learned two things: ma'oila kosher kodeshim, avzivche shalmei tzibur kosher kodeshim, and ma'oila b'tzafin avzivche shalmei tzibur b'tzafin. So the first question is, how do you know that zivche shalmeichem here means shlomim of the tzibur? Maybe this shlomim means a shlomim of a yochid. So Rashi tells us the way we know that this is referring to shlomim of a tzibur is because you never blow chatzoytros and blow tkiyos when you are bringing shalmei yochid. So that's why he must be speaking about shalmei tzibur, and we're comparing it to oil. So we have the tzafa in halacha, but there's also this kacheh kachim. So what is kacheh kachim? What are the symptoms of kacheh kachim? What different halacha does kacheh kachim have that we're learning from oila to shlomim? So Rashi tells us some of the things. V'nifsala b'tful yoim, etful yoim b'tachas kodeshim kalim. So if etful yoim meaning he was touched that day by a sheretz and he toivel that day. Actually, it doesn't matter when he was touched by a sheretz, but he toivel that day. But he still didn't wait till nightfall. If he touches basar shlomim, that's kodeshim kalim, he's not going to pass the basar. But if he touches basar that's kodeshim kachim, like the basar of achatos or the basar of shalmei tzibor, it will be possible. And uviyotzei, we know the basar of a shlom, the basar of kodesh kochim can only be eaten within the azara. If it leaves the azara, it becomes possible. But kodesh and kalam can be eaten anywhere in Yerushalayim, and therefore, even if it leaves the azara, it doesn't become possible. So we have two symptoms of kodesh kochim. I think there's going to be more that's going to come to light, but Rashi gives us two examples of things that are relevant to kodesh kochim. Kabaltik, zog to Gemara, but you still have that hekish that we mentioned from Shalmei Tzibur to Chatos. We can't learn something out of there. Is there anything that we could learn out of there? We're comparing Shalmei Tzibur to a Chatos. Machatos einin achelas ela l'zichrei kahuna. Just like a Chatos, only male kahana can eat. Av zivchei Shalmei Tzibur l'zichrei kahuna can only be eaten by male kahana. Amalei Abaye, if you're going to tell me that anytime you find a carbon that is hukash l'chatos, we learn that it's only eaten l'zichrei kahuna. Well, how about ayel nozer? The nozer brings a carbon shlomim. He brings a ram as a carbon shlomim. Dichsiv v'hikriv es karbonei l'Hashem keves ben shnosai tomim echad la'ila v'chivsa achas b'shnosa timimo l'chatos v'ayel echad tomim l'shlomim. So you see that the Nazir brings a chatas and oil and a shlomim. So you have over here a hekesh from the shlomim of a Nazir to the chatas. Are you going to say Hakanami Nema Tekisha Yakosov Lachatos Machatos Einen Achelas Ela Lazirchek Huna Av Ayel Nazir Nami Einen Echel Ela Lazirchek Huna? And the Gemara assumes that the pashtus is that the shlomim that a Nazir brings is eaten by everybody. Zok Gemara, there's a very big difference. Haki Hashta. By the Ayel Nazir, there's a pasuk that's telling us not to apply this hekesh. Why? Hasam Ksiv. The Torah says the kohen just takes the zroya b'sheila from the ayil and he makes tenufa on it. It says in the pasuk, "Lokach hakohen es hazroya b'sheila min ayil v'chalas matzah achas min hasal," and one challah from the basket, u'rekik matzah echad v'nosan al kapei hanozir achar skalchis nizrei, and he puts them on the hands of the Nazir, so they're making a tnufa. But it only registers this roya b'sheila, connecting it to the kohen. Michlal, we could assume from there, the kulei, baila machilei, everything else, the baila means. But talk to Gemara about this roya b'sheila, mia loy l'sachav ela l'zirchei kuna. But at least this roya b'sheila, we should learn from the hekesh techatos that could only be eaten for a male kohen. Talk Markasha, I don't know, maybe yeah. Biboy say no. You wouldn't learn this hekesh at all from chatos. Lagabe, who can eat it? You know why? Because the ayil nazir, the shlomim, is designated by the Torah Mefurish as not kachi kachim. Because the Torah says kachi ikri, kachi kachim lo ikri. Where do you see the Torah designates it as kachim and not as kachi kachim? So it says in the pasuk, V'heinif oisam akayin tenufa lefnei Hashem koydeshu lakayin. Doesn't say kodesh kachim, it says koydeshu. So the Torah is telling us this is not kodesh kachim. Don't learn from chatos that it should only be nechal l'zichrei kahuna. So here we have another clue that kachi kachim can only be eaten to male kahanim, and kachi kalim could be eaten by everybody, because the Gemara is saying vibal, it's called kachim, not kachi kachim. That's a reason why you shouldn't compare it to chatos, and therefore you should say that anybody can eat it. So Frank Gemara, so back to square one. We do have a hekesh between this shlomim of a nazir and chatos, and it's not to tell you that it's only eaten to kaihanim. So what is it to tell you? The Torah says beferish that if he only brought the shlomim and he took his haircut, that's good, right? It says v'nasan al kapei nazir achar galchis nizroi, and this is talking about the zroy b'shel of the shlomim. What if he didn't bring his shlomim? What if he only brought the chatos, or if he only brought the oila? Would that also make his taglachas kosher? Zogt more from the hekesh of the chatos to the oila to the shlomim. We learned that just like the shlomim allows him to do taglachas, so too the oila and the chatos, even only one of them would also clear him for his taglachas. Gewaltig. Zogt the heilige Gemara weiter. Hatoida ve'el nazir, the toida and the aisle of the nazir, which is a toida. Kadashim kalim, they are considered to be kadashim kalim. We just learned that a moment ago, right? Shechitason b'chol mokaim b'azar, and therefore they can be shechted anywhere in the azar, not only in the tzaf. V'domon ton shtei maton eshein arba. V'necholim b'chol ha'ir, they can be eaten in all of Yerushalayim, l'chol adam, to any person, b'chol machal, prepared in any fashion, l'yoyim v'layla at chatzos, only for the day and the night, following it up until chatzos midrabban. Hamur mehem, the parts of the carbon that are taken off to be given to the kohen, like the chaz of a shaik, and there's one bread from each of the 40 breads, from each of the 4 sets of 10, one bread is given to the kohen, so it's a total of 4 breads. All those kayoyta ben have all the halachas of the regular toida, like we just listed, except for the following difference: the muramem is only eaten to kaihanim or associated with kaihanim. So there's a bavus to shaila that is as follows: a shlomim, people bring, they want to eat basar, so therefore they can keep it for 2 days and 1 night. They can eat it for 2 days. They can have a meal for 2 days. The toida has the same amount of meat as the shlomim because it practically is a shlomim. But on top of that, there's 40 breads. That's a vast amount of food. So why would the Torah say you could only eat it for 1 day and 1 night? If anything, you should need more time to eat it all. So the Mefarshim say a beautiful machshava, and that is, why does someone bring a carbon toida? Because he had a nace happen to him, and he's celebrating a nace, and he's sharing and being mefarshim the nace. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted you to have a massive party. So if you have so much food to eat and you have so little time to eat it, what's going to happen is you're going to have to invite more people, and that was the intention of the toida, to be mefarshim a nace. Taner Rabbanon. That's why Moti makes the big Chanukah Mesiva every year. Taner Rabbanon. Es chazei atnuva v'shoika truma. So this is going back to the Chanukah Samishkan, right after the dreadful story of Nadav and Avihu dying. The Torah continued to talk about how the karbonis are going to be processed.
Yeah, so Yossi, just a second, does the lechem was a specific size? Or could they have served rolls? Yeah. Or could they have done, if every person is bringing his own, one guy's just going to bring small dinner rolls as opposed to sourdough bread?
No. The Torah says how much soilus. The Torah lists off exactly how big it has to be.
So you couldn't get away with just serving a challah with a hot dog inside, right?
No.
There was enough.
Someone told me that there was a Polish shul that they instead of having takonis about the maximum you're allowed to give by a kiddush, they made takonis about the minimum that you're allowed to give by a kiddush. So by karbonis, it's double, side of minimum and side of maximum is outlined. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. So it says so let's look at these psukim. Again, this is right after Nadav and Avihu died. The Torah is talking about how it's eaten. So it said over here, I'm going back a little bit because there's a lot of psukim. You should eat this b'mokim kadosh. This was talking about the mincha that was brought by the Chanukah Samishkan, and it has to be eaten b'mokim kadosh. We'll see what that means. Then the next pasuk says, that sounds like it's a step down. There's a pasuk right before that I actually wanted to highlight, which talks about the mincha. The v'achalta Moshe b'makom kadosh is talking about the lachmei toida over there, but the mincha itself had to be eaten in the azara. It's listed off. I don't have the chumash here, but the pasuk says it has to be eaten in the azara. Then the mincha is a step down, v'achalta Moshe b'makom kadosh, and then the chazayat nufa is a further step down, toichlu b'makom tahar. So the Gemara probes, where are these places? Zok Gemara, Tanur Rabban. The shatu, I skipped.
One of these is this the one that Moshe criticized why Aaron and his son didn't eat it?
Well, after these psukim, the Torah talks about the chatos, and then like a couple of psukim later, the Torah says, and that's where Moshe was upset, talking about the chatos. So here we're talking about the minchas.
Uh-huh.
So it's chazayat nuva ve'shoika truma, toichlu b'makom tahar. What does it mean b'makom tahar? Amar Nechemia v'chi rishonim b'tumah achlum. The two previous things that the pasuk was addressing, the mincha and the lachem toida, are those or the lachem that were brought over there? Were those eaten b'tumah? Of course not. Ella tahar mechalal shu tamei. The reason why the story says tar is vice the guys. It's not as pristine tar as kodesh or kodesh kodeshim. It's tar, but there's obviously an issue there. What does that mean? It means tar mitumas mitzayra, v'tamei mitumas zov. It's not a mitzayra who's nishtaleach chutz l'shalosh machanois, but it's a tumazov. Tumazov is allowed to come into the machane Yisrael, but is not allowed to come in to the machane Leviyah. Ve'zeh machane Yisrael. So what it's telling us is the chazet nufa and the shaka truma can be eaten where a zov may go, which means it can be eaten in the machane Yisrael, but not in the machane Leviyah. Now, just to clarify, Rashi tells us there was a parallel universe. There was the machane Shechina, machane Leviyah, and machane Yisrael by the Mishkan. But when the Beis HaMikdash was built, we also had those three areas. So by the Mishkan, the Machane Shechina was within the walls of the Azor, within the Kloyim. The Machane Leviyah was the Levim lived directly surrounding the Mishkan. That's the Machane Leviyah. And the Machane Yisrael was all of the Golim, the Eden who lived around it. Utul Machane, where a Mitzvah would have to stand, would be outside of the Machane Yisrael. But the Beis HaMikdash was standing, the entire Azorah, and even part of Harabayis up to the Chayil, was prohibited for a Tumah Mace to come in. Then the rest of Harabayis, I mean, it could be I'm mixing in the Rabbanos. But the Raisa for sure the Azoras Machne Shechina, where a Tumah Mace may not enter. Harabayis, a Tumah Mace, which would be considered Machne Leviyah, the Machne Leviyah would be Harabayis, where a Tumah Mace may enter, but a Tumah with a Tumah Yotze Megufoi, such as Keri and Ziva, may not come into the Machne Leviyah. And then there's all of Yerushalayim, where even a Zov and the Balkari is allowed to be there. And then the Mitzvah is not even allowed to be within the city limits. So those are the two parallel tracks on the three Machanos. So we're saying now that the Chazayat Nuf and the Shaka Truma was allowed to be eaten in the Machne Yisrael, just not in the Machne Leviyah. Correct, Gemara, maybe that's not pshat. Ve'metar mituma zov v'tamei mitumas meis. Maybe tar means it's a shtickle tamei. What's the shtickle tamei? Tumas meis, and that means it's restricted to a place where a tamei meis may come, but not tumas ziva. Meaning ve'ezeh zeh machne leviyah. Maybe the chazayat nuf and the shayka truma has to be eaten within the machne leviyah, not so far out as in the machne Yisrael. Omar Abaye, Omar Krah, for that I have another part. It says V'achaltem oisa b'mokim kadosh. It says about the pasuk earlier, V'achaltem oisa b'mokim kadosh, ki chakcha v'chak b'nechahi me'ishi Hashem ki chen tzuvesi. That's what it says about the earlier mincha. So we dash oisa b'mokim kadosh. It's only the mincha that has to be eaten b'mokim kadosh v'lo yacheres, but not the Chazayat Nufa and the Shaika Truma, the Mokim Kadosh. So that pushes it L'machane Leviyah. So again, there's three psukim. There's one pasuk talking about the mincha that says it has to be eaten in the Azara. Then the pasuk says the lachmei toida has to be eaten v'achalta moiseh b'mokim kadosh, in the holy place, but not in the Azara. So it pushes out the lachomim one level out to allow it to be eaten even in the Machne Leviyah. And then when we're talking about the Chazayat Nuva, the Torah pushes further. Hadechsev b'makom tar, which pushes it one more step after l'machane Yisrael. So that's how Abaye lined up the psukim to understand that there were three levels of kedusha. The mincha had to be eaten in the Azara. The lachmei toida have to be eaten in on Harabayis or within the Machne Leviyah, and the Chazayat Nufa that could be eaten in all of the Machane Yisrael. Okay, I just want to read what it says over here. Because there's obviously a toida brought over there. Zog to Gemara Viter. Rabba says no. I can go much more radical. Maybe oisaba makom kadosh. The Lachmei toida have to be eaten b'makom kadosh, v'lo yacheres b'makom kadosh, but nothing else needs to be eaten b'makom kadosh, meaning that the chazayat nuva can be eaten anywhere, even out of the Machne Yisrael. Af kol hagamri. And then Hadar Kazer Rechmana Teichel b'makom tar to bring it in and confine it Eila l'Machne Yisrael. Frank the Gemara, right? They're just giving a different way to how to dash the Psukim. But Frank the Gemara is not a good drasha because the Ema Eila l'Machne Levia. What you're saying b'makom tar means come in two machnas. Why don't by Jafka one machna? Dr. Gemara, because l'chadim ma'ilinan l'tati l'aymalin. Each pasuk, each limud, each chiddush will only translate into one machna, not two machnas. Zok Gemara, well, if you say that on the way in, then you should say it on the way out too. So when it says maybe it does only push it out one way. You can't have it both ways. Another problem we have is there's a pasuk that refers to all karbanis. You're never allowed to eat anything out of the Machne Yisrael. So why would I think Oisha is telling me that I could even eat the Chazayat Nufa out of Machne Yisrael? There is no such carbon anywhere that can ever be eaten out of the Machne Yisrael. And we have to stick with the Bayis Pshat that the first pasuk is in the Azorah, then it says V'makom Kadosh is referring to the Machne Levia for the Lachmei Toida, and then V'makom Tar referring to the Chazayat Nufa, and Shaka Truma is referring to the Machne Yisrael. Gebaltik. Zok the Hedel Gemara weiter. Shlomim Kodeshim Kalim Shechitasim B'chamokim Ba'azara V'domon Ton Shtei Maton Shenaba V'nechol B'chol Eile Chol Adam B'chol Maichol L'shnei Yomim V'layla Echad Hamurim Mehem Kayoytze Behem El Shamuram, the parts of the animal that's given to the Kohen Nechal HaKahanim L'Nshem V'Levneim U'Lavdeim. Zok the Hedel Gemara Tanu Rabban. There's three types of shlomims that the Torah discusses. The Torah discusses shlomim that you bring with a bakar. The Torah goes through several psukim discussing how that's processed. And then the Torah goes through another set of psukim that talks about bringing the carbon shlomim with a tzayin. And then the Torah goes through another set of psukim if you brought the carbon shlomim with an ace, with a goat. So there's three parashas of shlomim, one after the other. In the first parasha of Shlomim, where the Torah talks about the bakar, it says, where should you shecht it? V'shachtoi Pesach oil moed, at the gate of the oil moed. By the tzayin, it says, v'shachat oisoi lefnei oil moed. And by the a's, it says again, v'shachat oisoi lefnei oil moed. So lefnei oil moed, Pesach oil moed, means anywhere in the Azorah, it's in front of the oil moed. So that's how we know that the shechita can occur anywhere. L'hachshir is kol haruchos the Kodeshim Kal. Kal v'chomer l'tzofin. Kal v'chomer you can check in the tzofin. Now this Kal v'chomer is a very shver Kal v'chomer. If the Torah was machshir kol ruchos, why do I need a Kal v'chomer to tzofin? Tzofin is also one of the ruchos. Zokt Rashi, of course, according to the first Tana that we're learning, you don't need a Kal v'chomer. But we're about to learn a Tana by the name of Rabbi Eliezer, who's going to tell us that he's going to bring a Kal v'chomer to say punkt v'keret. He's going to bring a Kal v'chomer to say that the shlom should not be allowed to be shechted b'tzofay. So to counteract that Kal v'chomer, the Rabbanan offered this Kal v'chomer. But they really don't need a Kal v'chomer because they learn that oil moed means anywhere. Zog to Gemara, what's the Kal v'chomer l'tzofay? Uma kachik kachim, ma the kachik kachim. Shaloi huchshru b'chol haruchos. It's very restricted as to where you can shecht it. Yet huchshru b'tzofay, it is qualified to be shechted b'tzofin. Kachim kalam, which is so much less discriminating. Shehuchshru b'chol haruchos. Ein idin shehuchshru b'tzofin. Surely you should be allowed to shecht it on the tzofin. But Rabbi Eliezer is going to say no. I need a pasuk to tell you tzofin. I wouldn't know through logic. Tikfakeret. I might say that you wouldn't be able to shecht the shlomim and other kachim kalam b'tzofin. And I'm going to look at Rashi, who changes the gears a little bit. And he says, I actually need a pasuk to be machshir tzofin. I would not know it logically. Because I could have made a Kal v'chomer that would tell me that a shlomim you can check anywhere but tzofin. Think about it. Uma kodeshim kalim. Madach kodeshim kalim shehuchshru b'chol haruchos. It could be shechted anywhere. Nevertheless, the place that kodeshim kalim could be shechted, Shlomim can be shechted anywhere, yet the places where it can be shechted, you cannot check kachim there. Shekacha kachim, shaloi hochshru ela b'tzafon. Kacha kachim whose shechita could only be b'tzafon. Surely the shlomim you shouldn't be able to shlacht in the kacha kachim zone. And they did shaloi hochshru mekaimon eitel kachim kalim. The Rishash adds a little bit of flavor to the Kal V'chomer, and he says as follows: Madich the kachim kalim, which you can shecht anywhere. We don't. It has a lot of room. It's berevach wherever you want to shecht, you can shecht. But we still don't let kachim infringe on its territory. And we say, no, kachim, you stick to your own zone. You can't shecht in our zone. So kachim, which are given such a small area to shecht in, surely will protect kachim from being infringed upon by the kachim kalim. That's how the Rishash learns the Kal V'chomer. So therefore, Talmud Loimer says 3 times oil moed. Talmud Loimer al Pesach oil moed. So let's look at the Tzionim, because he brings it all in. Talmud Loimer v'shachtu Pesach oil moed by the bakar, and then says lefnei oil moed by the tzayin, and lefnei oil moed the 3rd time by the eis. So we have 3 limudim over here. What do we use them for? But the Gemara wants to b'mai kamifli. What is exactly the machlokes? Because halacha l'maisa, everybody agrees that shalomim can be shechted anywhere, even in the tzafon. And the whole question is, do you need a pasuk for it or not? So the whole nafkamina is how they darshan the psukim. Tanakama savar tlosa kroi ksivi. We have 3 psukim to teach us that a carbon shlomim can be shechted anywhere in the azara. Chad lugufei t'niboi pesach oil moed. There's a rule that you cannot shech the shlomim unless the door of the heichal was open for the day, because every night they would close it and lock it. The door had to already be opened. If you shechted a carbon shlomim before the door was opened, it would be possible. Parallel, the Mishkan didn't have a door, so it was always open. But a Mishkan, Dr. Rashi, if the Levim had already dismantled the Mishkan, or they had not yet set it up, and you shechted, it wouldn't be kosher, the shlomim. So one pasuk is to tell you that you need Pesach. You need that the door should be open for business. Vichad lachshutzot. I want to tell you that you could also shecht on the entire width of the Azara, not only in front of the Pesach, but even to the side of the Pesach. Because the Pesach was like 10 amos wide, but you had an Azara was 135 wide. The entire width of the Azara you could shecht it. Vichad lives al tzidei. There were lishkos lined up all around in the Azara. In the lishkos, you wouldn't be allowed to shecht. You're only allowed to shecht in the open area of the Azara. V'tzafain lo yitzrichra. And the Tanakam hold you don't need a pasuk for tzafain because logic dictates it's part of lifnei oil moed, so it doesn't need a pasuk. Rabbi Eliezer's over chad lugufei diniboi pesach oil moed. The chad lachshut tzafain. I do need a pasuk lachshut tzafain because Rabbi Eliezer holds I would have a Kal V'chomer to tell me otherwise. The chad lachshut tzafain. So how does Rabbi Eliezer know that sidei tzadin you can't check? That I can figure out on my own. So what Rabbi Eliezer needed a pasuk for, the Tanakama figured out with logic, and what the Tanakama needed a pasuk for, Rabbi Eliezer figured out with logic. Why is it that when it's talking about the bakar, the pasuk speaks out except Pesach oil moed? Well, by the A's and by the sign, it just says lefnei oil moed. It doesn't say Pesach. Zok the Gemara, we already know the answer because the Gemara referred to it just a moment ago, but now we're going to see it in its hometown. Which is the drasha that we referred to a moment ago. And we learn from there is bizmanchu pasuach, dafka when the door is open, v'loy bizmanchu no, not if it's locked. Now, what if it's closed but it's not locked? The Gemara is going to discuss that soon. Itmar nami Omar Ma'ukva Bar Chama Omar Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina Shalomim Sheshachtan Kodim Sheyiftechu Dalsois Hahechal Psulin. Why? Shenema V'Shachtu Pesach Oil Moed Bizman Shepesach Hahechal Pasuach V'Loi Bizman Shehuno. B'Marava Masni Hachi. In Marava they used to quote as follows: Hachi Omar Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha Omar Rabbi Ashi Shalomim Sheshachtan Kodim Sheyiftechu Dalsois Hahechal Psulin. Uve Mishkan the parallel is Koidim sheyamidu levim es hamishkan before they set it up when they were stopping, or ula'achar sheyifraku levim es hamishkan, or after they had already disassembled it, psulim.
Or they put it up or after they put it up.
Right. So the point is, shalomim can't just be brought whenever you want. It has to be brought when the system is set up. It's not like it's a freelance carbon. I think that's what it's teaching us. Pshita, one thing is pashut. Mugaf kinoil. If the door is closed, it's as if it's locked. Now, they actually bring down, the Shmuel gave me, there's a publication on the Daf. So there's actually a shayla in the Rishonim, Lagabe Yichud. What if you're in a room with a woman and the door is closed but not locked? Is that Yichud? There are those who bring a riot from here that it might be Yichud. And he quotes the Chumash Raj about it. But I remember when I learned Hilchas Yichud in Lakewood, we actually learned it in Elsman, Hilchas Yichud, we learned from Reb Moshe that he held if it's a busy neighborhood, even if you're in a room with a woman and the door is locked, since at any moment someone can knock on the door and they want to come in, that also is not Yichud. So people think, oh, Moshe is so makel in Yichud. Let me tell you another halacha we learned from Moshe about Yichud, that it's also to go out on a date with a girl in a car. Why? Because Moshe also holds that Yichud isn't only if you're locked up with a woman. It's also if you're in a situation where you could easily be secluded with a woman. So if you're in a car, you can easily turn, even if you're in a busy street, you can easily turn into a very secluded area, and that will be yichud. So Rav Moshe says that's also not allowed. So being in a car with a woman at night, according to Rav Moshe, that would not be allowed. Don't quote me on anything. Everything I say is for entertainment purposes only. But that's what I think I remember. Zok to Gemara, Vilain Mai. What if there was just a curtain covering the doorway? Is that considered like the door is closed? That's an open, that's considered open. It's just for tznius, it's a privacy curtain, but it's not a closed door. That would not disqualify the shlom. Goifamai. What if there was a block? What if there was some type of obstruction? You on the shechtin, there's a pile of stuff there, there's a piece of wood, someone set up a piece of plywood, someone put a for sale sign there. What would that be considered a hefsek? So the Gemara discusses it. Now, the first question that should pop into all of our minds is, if you can shecht anywhere in the Azara, there's a massive obstacle in the middle of the Azara, the Mizbeach. So, from the fact that the Mizbeach is huge, why is the Gemara clearing the Shaila? You have an obstacle right there. So this is Tosfos' kasha. Tosfos asks, Goiva mai, Tema, I goiva choshev hefsek, if you're going to tell me that some type of obstacle is a hefsek, imkein keneged ha-Mizbeach, yivsal. Shemavsik, the Mizbeach is a big, massive obstacle. Vein Leimer, and you can't tell me the Mizbeach isn't tall enough because the door of the Heichel was so tall, even if you're standing in front of the Mizbeach, you can see the top half of the door. Vein Leimer, Mishum Deroya Pesach Mila Maila Le Mizbeach. The Hasolka Daitach Hashta, the Goiva Shmoina Mafsik. The Gemara is talking over here, we'll soon see that even something that's only 8 amas would be Mafsik. The Mizbeach was way taller than that. So you would for sure be able to see over that too. The mishum the goiva shmoina hayasoisim kol pesach. You can't say that since it's 8 amasai, it completely blocks out the pesach. The hasaver shaya hapesach goiva eshemama. We know that the door of the heichel was 20 amas high. Even 8 amas wouldn't block that out. So Tosfos doesn't say a teretz here, but he brings down in the Mesivta. There are those who answer that the Mizbeach is part of the process. Something that's part of the system is not going to be a ma'akeh. We're talking about a foreign object. That's what the Shaila is about. So the Gemara is going to be pushing the Shaila. Toshma, the Tanya, Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda, Shnei Pishpish hoyu beveis hachalipos. So let's stop for a minute. If we look closely at the floor plan of the Beis Hamikdash, we'll see that before the Heichel, there was an entrance chamber called the Ulam. The Ulam was 30 amas wider than the Heichal, so there's an overlap, or there's an overhang of 15 amas on either side. So the Ulam was 15 amas wider on either side than the Heichal. What did they do in the Ulam? Over here in this area, and over here in this area was a storage area. It was actually a locker area where the Kaihanim would store their knives. Everybody was very protective over their chalif, and they would store their chalifs there, and therefore it was called Mokoy HaChalifos, or Beis HaChalifos. Now, Rashi says that the Beis HaChalifos that we're talking about, I always thought that it was inside this chamber, but Rashi says it was actually behind. This was the area of Beis HaChalifos. This was the area of Beis HaChalifos, and the lockers were accessible from the outside, from the back of these wings. As you see in this picture here, I'm standing beside the Heichel, and I'm facing the east, My back is facing the Ma'ariv, and you could see there's little holes in the blocks, which were the little lockers. So there was two Pishpashim that the Gemara talks about. Now, this picture doesn't show it properly because this is showing the diagonal, but the Pishpashim were over here so that if you're in the Ulam, you can look straight back, not on an angle like what you see here, straight back. Or Rashi and Gittin learns the Pishpish is at the side, so you can see this entire area would be visible if you look out through this Pishpish, through this small door. But this area would not be visible. So Zok to Gemara, Shnei Pishpish, where are we up to over here? Let's get her. Shnei Pishpishin, Pishpashin, how do you pronounce that word? Pishpishin, which were two doors. They're small little doors. We're going to soon see how small these little doors were. Shnei Pishpishin hayu beveis hachalifos. Period. Now, the Brisa continues to say, and the Shita changes the girsa, Goiva Shemoina, and at this point, the Gemara understands that even though blocking your sight of this Pishpish was an obstacle that was Goiva Shemoina, it doesn't matter. The two Pishpishim, you're still considered like you're standing opposite the door, this auxiliary door, this Pishpish of the Oil Mayit, even though V'goiva Shmona, even though there's something in front of you that's blocking your view of the door that's 8 Amasai.
Why do you need a view of that area?
Because we pass the Oil Mayit. It has to be facing the Oil Mayit.
I thought the Pesach was the hip.
Well, the problem is, if I'm at the back, then I can't check there. So they wanted, if you're a security expert, if you want coverage everywhere, they wanted coverage in the entire Azara that they could check anywhere. So the way they got coverage was they made multiple psachim so that wherever you would be standing in the Azara, you would be Noichach Pesach, not the main Pesach, but an auxiliary Pesach. So that's why they did it. So why did they do it? Kedei lahachshir es ha'azara kula saif b'achilas kachei kachim and l'shchudas kachim kalam. They wanted the entire Azara to be considered el penei oil mayit. The Azara was on the sides and behind as well. So we're going to get to how do they shech behind. So Zok to Gemara, Mailav, what does it mean, the Goivish Shmoina? It means the Ika Kamayu Shmoina. There's an obstacle in front of you that blocks your view of the door that's 8 Amasai. Zok to Gemara, that's not what this Bryce is saying. It's the Gavhoi Ninu Shmoina. It means the height of the doorways were 8. So we're talking about a small Pishpish. It was only 8 Amasai. It's about 12 feet. I mean, compared to 20 Amas, it's a little doorway, but it's a huge opening, right? And the reason why they weren't full height is because they weren't really used to go in and out. They were just used so that we can consider those areas Pesach Ha'el Good Waltik. Meisei Frek Gemara. Kol Hashorim Shahayu Sham Goivon Esrim Amma V'Rachvan Eser Amma. So how could you say that these were doorways? You know what the doorway has to be. It has to be 20 by 10. Zak Gemara Pishposh and shiny. Like I mentioned a moment ago, that this isn't a real door for entrance and exit. It's only made so we have the Pesach Ha'el Frek Gemara, but the problem is if you had an opening that lets you see the back, so that takes care of the rear area. But what about immediately to the north and to the south of the Ulam? How are you going to see that? And for the Gemara, that the doors were on a diagonal, so you could see in both directions. You could see the doorway from both directions. So that's what the Gemara says. Zok the Gemara, the Ma'ayil Luhu Bekeren Zavis. And that's what that picture that I showed you earlier was depicting. If you're standing here at the back, you could see the doorway. But if you'd be standing on the side, you'd be able to see the doorway as well. See, we didn't know about all these little things. We learned that the Mizbeach had a little wing sticking out of it. There's a lot of little extra things that they didn't put in the book that we learned when we were a Cheder. Blumenthal's book was about it. So Zok to Gemara, what about Achayre? What about behind? Achayre Beis HaKaparis Mai. That you can't see from these doors. So tomorrow, no problem. We had a hole there too. Tashma, Amar Rami Bar Yehuda, Amarav, Lul Kat and Haya Achayre Beis HaKaparis. There was actually a little opening. That was at the back of the Kaparis. A tiny little opening. Gavoya Shmoyna Amas. It was 8 Amas high. Kedei lahachshir es ha'azara lachilas kachim kachim u'lashchidas kachim kalam. So even at the back, they were Were they able to see inside? I mean, it was only small. It was only a small hole. How could they see through that? There's a tiny little hole. They'd have to put their eye there. Yeah, I guess they were able to see inside. The Hainu Dichsiv And that's what the pasuk says in Divrei Yomim, Shnayim leparbar. So this pasuk is talking about the sentries that were set up, honor guards that were set up around the Beis Hamikdash. So it says leparbar lemayrev on the west, arba lamasila 4 for the pathway, and Shnayim leparbar 2 outside. So what are we talking about? Zah the Gemara, my leparbar, Amar Rava bar Shila, command the Amar klape bar towards the outside. So on the outside, around the perimeter, wherever there was a little pishpish or even a big door, wherever there was an opening, there was an honor guard, a sentry set up. Okay, gewaltig, Baruch Hashem, we were zeicher to finish Daf. Okay, tomorrow we're gonna have to move on it because tomorrow's Daf is new. Get going. We're gonna have to get going.
Good.
Shkoyach.
Shkoyach, Yossi. Shkoyach.